Okay. So
Please,
audience, we welcome you all. Good morning for the first session of day 4. And here with us, Dr. Anand Halik, he's a Vice President of Data Labs. So yes, Sebin, Unikrishnan, yeah, please proceed. Yeah.
Yes. So let's have a brief introduction about the resource person, as pointed out by Dr. Victor Paul. Dr. Anand is the Vice President of Data Labs, HDFC Lives Bangalore. He has more than 20 years of industry experience in information technology and data science domain. He is highly skilled in digital transformation and digital technologies, especially artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, data analytics, IoT, to radically improve the business processes, operational efficiency, and customer experience. He has developed and implemented several AI-based products for healthcare industry. He has worked in companies like BSNL, TeleDNA Communications, Hinduja Global Solutions, British Telecom, Everteam, and My Healthcare Technologies. So Dr. Anand has participated and published research papers in various national and international journals, and also he's a reviewer in IEEE journals. He has also delivered keynote talks, presentations in leading AI industry forums, led panel discussions, and conducted workshops for academics and industry professionals. Dear Anand sir, we are happy to have you here at Indian Institute of Information Technology, Kottayam, as a resource person for the faculty development program on sensor data analytics. So we welcome you wholeheartedly, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor Sebin Jose, and thank you, Professor Unikrishnan and Dr. Victor Paul. And thanks to all the staff members from IIIT Kottayam. And happy to join this session because we have participants from across India, all from the academic side and research side, and also it is an opportunity for me as well to interact with you all. And yeah, I'm sure like this will be a fruitful session where we can exchange ideas and on the sensor data analytics. Maybe we can get into the session now. Yeah. So this is the broad outline of the talk today. We'll see before getting into the sensor data analytics, we can talk about the healthcare analytics, because that is the basis. Even if when we talk about the sensor data, we need to understand how the healthcare analytics are helping and what is the kind of architecture generally followed and all the stuff. And then it's not like any other data, finance or insurance or any other retail or manufacturing. Healthcare is little challenging compared to any other. So that way we can look into the challenges of healthcare data, and then we can jump into healthcare sensor analytics, the topic of the today, like how in the various sensors in the healthcare domain, we are trying to make use of it for enhancing the patient experience. So that we can see the wearable sensors and a couple of real-time use cases. I felt like I'll share what I have gone through, saying that that is really a cutting-edge kind of the sensor-based applications that I wanted to share some few examples. And I personally involved in some of the applications where deep learning based, machine learning analytics based applications, where particularly in the disease diagnosis and treatment area. That also I thought of sharing few glimpses of it. And then if time permits, we can talk, we can see some of the healthcare sensor analytics. Okay, we have a data available with us, which is collected from multiple sensors. How are we going to do the analytics? Very basics. Some of you might have seen some advanced analysis and all, but this is to give perspective to all the participants, saying that how the data look like, and then how we can do similar such kind of analytics and all. So that's the broad outline. We'll see first health data analytics and the necessity for that, like how it has started and all stuff. So data analytics are bringing all modern technologies, AI, ML, analytics.
Hello, sir. Hello,
yeah.
Sir. Are you presenting the screen?
Yes, I'm presenting.
It's not visible.
No? Okay.
It's not visible.
maybe I just need to go back and show you what I was
Yes,
talking
sir.
about.
It's
This is the
perfect
agenda I
now.
was talking about. At least I was covering each and every point, so that way we are not missing anything. And just a heading. And then this is the slide I was talking about. So here, what I was trying to say is like, this is not new. Healthcare is a little old domain, but recently the advancements happening, we can just look into why there is a sudden interest, and then everywhere the innovation is happening. Startup companies, enterprises, everybody is looking into the healthcare, and then they see that no, what is the maximum they can get out of it. The reason being is in the last 5 to 10 years, I can say the kind of growth happened in terms of computing and storage and the bandwidth, communication bandwidth. These three things are important, I feel. Because when we talk about the Moore's law, the processing power doubles up every 18 months. And the Kreider's law says that no, the storage capacity doubles up every 13 months. Similar for the communication bandwidth itself. The last 10 years, we got a tremendous growth in this area. So we have got a highest processes available even in our laptop. Forget about laptop, in our mobile phones are equipped with 8 GB of kind of RAM. We know that. And storage, unlimited kind of, we are going towards a kind of unlimited storage, terabytes of zettabytes of data storage is possible nowadays. So these things helped everybody to get into the mainstream and start thinking about what I can contribute for the advancement. So otherwise, earlier it was only through the R&D units or the enterprise companies, they used to get into this kind of research. But later, due to the advancement and these kind of facilities made available to all, then everybody, they were able to get into the kind of research. That's where all the development started. And we can say that it is not only the computing power or the storage. The recent development in the algorithm, there is, for example, it may be a small function, ReLU function in place of tanh or sigmoid function, that has created a big impact in terms of deep learning applications. And similarly, the ImageNet, ResNet, or transformer-based natural language processing, all this has opened up a new window of opportunity in terms of doing research and trying to solve the problems what we have in front of us in multiple areas, particularly in the healthcare industry, as it is big in number. Again, we can add up some more points like why we are looking at advances. Either when I say the advancement, it can be a AI ML, or it can be a sensor, it can be big data. Let us put all these things together first, and then we can dive into our sensor specific. Currently, we are at 7.7 billion, and we are going towards 8.5 billion by 2030. And here, the advancement of medical and all this thing, we have creating a challenge like creating a geriatric population. If you look at the age 65 and above people, they'll be higher than the aged 5 years and below, and total in 1.5 billion kind of thing. And these are all the top causes of death, like smoking, obesity, hypertension, all this. And we all know, like, we are struggling with the COVID for last 1.5 to 2 years. And we are not able to fulfill the capacity. We are not able to treat all the people. So definitely we need to look into new avenues for resolution to solve our problems in healthcare, right? And there are other growth drivers as well we can talk about. One is in expenses. Definitely we all know the expenses is going high. And the very important point is the healthcare workforce, particularly the physicians. As per the World Health Organization, we need to have 2.5 doctors per 1,000 population. But most of the developing countries, it is 1 per 1,000. That is the kind of a trend that is happening. And the cost increasing for the individual as well as for the government and institution, and it is across. That's a global phenomena it is. Global healthcare expenditure is going high. It's not only the doctors, the nurses also, shortages, healthcare assistants, everybody. And that's where we are looking now some augmenting methodologies, sensors, IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning based applications, so that we can serve more, and whatever we are already serving, we can do it in a better way, more efficient way, more cost effective. We can make the facilities available to all the population. That's the kind of idea. I think in the last 4 days, we are talking about all analytics and all. I don't want to cover more on this area, but just so how it has evolved and what people are currently looking at it. Earlier, we started with the data warehousing and business reporting, business intelligence. Just at least we know that like we are able to capture the data and then we are able to report something. That was the kind of strategy at the initial stages. And then we started pulling all the data together and then creating a nice visualization, which is continuous. Even with the incremental data, we were able to look at things, how it looks. That's where it started with all, maybe people would have started with Excel and Python and R kind of graphs. And then we have advanced applications like Tableau, Power BI, and so many data visualization tools available nowadays. And then we got to the descriptive analytics, then slowly into the predictive analytics and big data analytics. That we started, we are having a control in the data, and then we were able to, with that past trend and with the multiple data flowing from all the angles, we were able to process the data. We got the capability and we got the knowledge to do all these things, so that we were able to predict the future events. Based on the symptoms, we were able to understand the patient, the disease pattern, what is the probability of this patient is now in future, what is the kind of diseases he might or she might get it. That kind of analytics. And let us say hospital stay period. With the symptoms in the particular patient with this age group and the gender, if they are admitting, what is the number of days they will stay in the hospital, and what is the early date they will get discharged. All these things are important in terms of when you plan your healthcare activities. Because for us, if you look at from a patient angle, we go to a hospital, take an appointment and come back. But when you need to treat hundreds and thousands of patients, you definitely need to have all the strategy in place, saying that, no, what is the operational capacity and all. So for that, it is definitely helping this kind of predictive analytics and predictive prescriptives. Then it is advanced. Next is like we are talking about a prescriptive analytics that will say that, no, what we need to do for the problems, whatever we have faced in future. That level we are thinking about now, doing the analysis. Again, the challenges we said, like what kind of challenges we might face in the healthcare data particularly. I can say the data growth. To talk about the data growth, I just wanted to go back to the previous slides. I think we have not covered in detail in this infographics. You look at the kind of data for example, human genomic data, it is taking 3 GB of the size. And look at the other different numbers, the X-rays, the MRI, CT scan and all, it is taking a big number, right? And average people have calculated it's around, per patient, it is taking 80 MB of space. So when you have this kind of data, it is growing, and definitely we need a system to handle all such data. Particularly, I think the way we are doubling up all the data every 2 years, what we have collected so far up to 2010 or something. There is a kind of statistics it says. So in order, the every industry is happening, particularly in healthcare, it is phenomenal way it is going on. And the infrastructure, how we need to keep up our storages, server, security, we're going to see that. And data sources, what are all the different data sources? In healthcare, we can talk about, let us say we have got an IPD, inpatient department, or OPD, outpatient department, or there is a HIS, hospital information system, LIS, it's a lab information system. There are different departments. Every department will now generate new data points. For example, EMR will have all the patient details, and it is organized in SOAP form. Subjective, objective, assessment and plan. Subjective, what is the chief complaint the patient has come? What is the assessment done by the doctor? And what is the prescription we have given? What is the vitals recorded during the time? What is the allergic symptoms, whatever it is, patient history, a past pathological report, everything is getting added up. And similarly, the lab report, the MRI scans, X-rays, pathological report, all this. So we are going to see in detail about the census. We are collecting continuously the data from census. So we need to look into all the data sources. At the same time, we need to see that how I can standardize those reports in a right format so that I can make use of the data and then take some insightful decision. For that, we need to look at all the data sources. Quality of the data. For example, when you look at a pathology report, when you do in one lab, they will note down the but still it is not fully standardized. G. Sebin, is it visible? Is it audible? Hello.
Sir, actually, there was a loss in connection,
Yeah.
and the
Now,
PPT is
now
not
connected
present. No, the PPT is not visible now.
Okay, I understand.
Okay. Yes, it's visible. Yes.
Yeah, right. And again, the security. Security also a very important factor because the hospital, they hold the personal information about the patient, their family history, disease history, and everything. We have seen many cases where data breaches happened, and then big hospital and enterprises, they are now paying millions of rupees as a penalty. So you need to be very careful in terms of handling the patient data. Other things, policies and governance. So it is it's a vast. The data is we are collecting it through wearable devices, sensors, and existing medical devices everywhere. So you need to have clear policies and governance mechanism in order to manage the things. And fragmentation it is in a different level. The data has been organized. Let us say it is a syntactic. It is defining common formats across teams or sites or organization. That is a syntactic way of looking at it. Semantic, it is an agreeing on common definitions. How I'm, as I said, like how I'm referring the cholesterol value. Is it in so all the parties together agreeing for some common definitions. And political, maybe some organization will say that no, whatever I'm saying, it need to be followed across. this way, the data also, it is fragmented in syntactic and semantic and politically. It is now divided. So that way also people are facing challenges. So we need to have a right data strategy. And if at all we are collecting so much of data, then if it is not made available to the doctors and healthcare professionals, it is of no use. So right visualization, data visualization mechanism should be there in place so that that can be explained to the doctors in a clear way. So governance we have seen already. So healthcare data governance perspective, there are very important the guidelines, HIPAA guidelines, which is primarily used in US, but across people are taking these as a standard practices, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And another one is GDPR, though it is on general data protection, but in healthcare also how we need to do that. What is the rights we have on the data subject? What is the controller role? How we can transfer personal data between countries and the different organizations. Let us say that some healthcare institute, they are into the drug development. They wanted to share data about the trials, whatever they are doing in the drug development. They need to follow all these things, and then they need to manage it carefully. So entire European Union people have come out with the GDPR. So these are all the certain guidelines people have come out by which we were able to handle it in a better way. And cleaning, we have already seen this, like some of the statistics say that in this diagram, 89% of the data time, let us say a person working on, goes on just managing the data. Managing is what? Like searching, preparing, and protecting, that's it. And only 90% or 20, it can be broadly, let us say 80-20 kind of, only 20% is the time we are able to get into the analyzing the data and trying to get the insights from that. So that is the kind of challenges in data analytics, particularly healthcare, because of that kind of heterogeneous in nature and the complexity standards. And again, if you look at here, it is as I said, like HIS, LIS, and different wearable devices and all. First of all, we need to unify all the data together. It can be in a structured format, it can be unstructured format. It will come from a HIS. First of all, we need to bring in uniformity. So that's where we do data unification, and then we take this data for further analysis. And very important thing is data interoperability. So that's where the standards like HL7, HIPAA, HIX, HITSP, all those things have come up. Where now, at least now, we were able to talk in a similar lines. Let us say a company, GE, is producing one scan equipment, and how, if it is different for different countries, it becomes impossible for a patient to refer. For example, taking a treatment in India and then goes to the Europe or US. So that way now people are coming out with they are more aligned to this kind of general standards, but it is not fully aligned. Still, we are seeing a lot of irregularities in that area. That's why people are struggling with exchanging information. So data interoperability is very important in healthcare in terms of if we are interested in getting full insight from the data whatever we have, or how we can exchange and then see the benefits among various data whatever we have. Now let us get into the sensor-based healthcare data analytics. If you look at this domain, I was thinking, like, is it like sensor analysis? Is it a domain of doctors, or is it a domain of computer scientists or statistician? I think it is combination of all. Even it is not only the data scientist or the physicians. It's with the statistician and sociologist, because most of the time we are not only looking at the vitals, we understand the patient from a 360 degree perspective, where he lives, what he eats, what is the geographic condition, and then what kind of lifestyle behaviors the person is having. So in order to look into the sensor analysis, whenever we need to do such analysis, I think that all the domain need to join together to get a meaningful outcome. So that's a point I would like to highlight here. So more and more patients are, why we need to look at the sensors in healthcare for collecting information is, now we know it is like, we order things on Amazon, we call taxis and Uber. This becomes normal. Maybe some 10 years back, it was something new for us. So people are looking always the comfort and then great experiences, whatever the services. Even a healthcare has become, the patient expects a lot of updates, the appointments, the surgery, whatever they undergo, they need the information need to be provided to them in time. And what is the procedure we are planning to do, and then what is the post-operative instructions. Everything need to be clearly communicated, and the medicines, prescriptions, past history, symptoms, we need to look at their allergy conditions, everything. So it is becoming a more and more data centric. And earlier it was, the more emphasis was given on the hospital, how I can build my hospital with the information super highway kind of thing, and how I can now put more and more capabilities so that I can handle a number of patients. But now the trend has changed to patient centric. I'm not looking more into increasing infrastructure or the capability. Then people started looking at keeping the patient as a center of the ecosystem, and then they start looking at it. Okay, a patient, when they are a normal patient, just for a casual visit to the hospital, what is his experiences? How I can enhance that? How I can make his appointment in a better way? How I can how I can share the prescriptions in a digital format, and how I can send the medicines online after the consultation is done. And now we all have seen among this total population who have joined this call, at least one time in the last 1.5 year to 2 year, we might have done one video call with the doctors. Earlier it was kind of impossible, or people are not ready, doctors were not ready for any video call. But now we are okay to get into the, because otherwise you will not have the access to that doctor at all, because everything is on a pandemic, everything is locked, and then you do not have an access. But the video consulting, teleconsulting, telemedicine has opened up a lot of doors where people at the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, they were able to get the same facilities whatever they are getting in the metro cities, using the telemedicines and the video consulting. So every company, it can be an enterprise, MNCs or startup companies, they were looking into the ways how I can keep the overall hospital ecosystem, healthcare ecosystem as patient-centric instead of hospital-centric. So that is the idea everywhere. And now, if you look at the sensors, what are the different sensors in healthcare? In a high level, if you look at it, can be a temperature sensor, blood pressure, ECG or EAG, or even blood glucose level, SpO2. These are all the basic, well-known sensors we all know, from where we can connect either remotely or through wire, and then we collect a lot of data. We're going to see that now, how are we going to get the data, what is the ecosystem, all those things. I think in the past few days, again, you might have seen the IoT architecture. I'm not going to talk in detail about it, because I think you know this subject better. So there are communication wise, we can connect through Bluetooth or Zigbee or IEEE 802. These are all the communication method. And healthcare IoT framework is concerned, this is a kind of a high level architecture we can call. So this is the publisher, and we have a broker, and then the last is the subscriber, right? So it represents the publisher represents the network of connected sensors. The sensors can be anything. It can be as we have seen, the temperature, or it can be a pulse oximeter or anything. And it can be in the form of raw sensors, or it can be wearable devices only for the medical purpose, or for example, a smart watch, which is a dual purpose. We look at all the watch function as well as from the sensor function. So this publisher, it sends this information continuously through a network to a broker. That's what we say in the network. The network is, it can be a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or ITNA2, all this multiple different ways we have got. So it continuously sends there. So broker, what it does is, it is responsible for collecting, managing the communication, and then collecting and storing all the data on continuous basis on each and every devices with a proper ID, whatever, for to differentiate between different devices. And the subscriber is, it continuously monitors. Once we have the data, we can build a multiple solution over it or on it. Yeah, so we can have the hospital staff, they can look at it, the insurance provider, they can look at this data, the medical research mainly, because that's where they can see that what is that efficacy of that particular medicine or the treatment process. Pharmaceutical scientists, so that they can develop a better drug. And let us say the caregiver for the patient, they can also look at the data, saying that how is the trend. Particularly the physician, he will look into this data. So it continuously monitors. It provides the capability for the user, end user. End user here is the doctor basically, and we have got allied services people. We are talking about medical research, insurance, and all. This subscriber, it analyzes. We can build all the analytical capabilities here, and we can provide the data visualization. And it can be in a cloud format, so that you go to a particular location or click an app, you continuously see the trend of a particular patient. If you are looking at it, he is under the high fever, we wanted to monitor the temperature for next 48 hours, and then we are interested in to understand the glucose, blood glucose level. So all the things will be continuously collected and displayed and stored also for the future purposes. At a trend, we can see, we can look at the past trend, and we can, that's where we are talking about the predictive analysis, where it will say that if it is going like this with this kind of symptoms, the patient might generate this kind of complications. So all the things we will get it. So this is the broad architecture. HIOT we can call, healthcare IoT. And similar thing to in a different format, we got a patient, there are heart rate monitoring, blood pressure, and we got a wearable devices, and it all goes to the cloud, and we store it, and one part of it we are storing it, one other part of it we are doing analytics, and then primarily this information is given or displayed to the doctor, so that the right clinical decision he can take for a better treatment, or for any surgery or whatever, how to overcome that particular disease. There are multiple areas. I think it's again a big topic. Sensors alone, I think it is a lot of innovation is happening in this area. To cover the entire sensors, how it is connected, how it is organized, it will be very difficult within the short span. So I thought just covering a few areas, let us say geriatric care, how real-time monitoring is happening. For example, we are interested in looking at the geriatric health. The person is under observation, he is undergoing a treatment, but we need to monitor the improvement, how he is walking, how he is getting up, how is he having a good sleep, what is the movement within this building. All these things are possible by employing the right sensors. We can talk about the innovations in sensors, so that it will not become so bulky or becomes difficult for a person to handle. So we got a very high-end sensors available, which can be seamlessly connected to a person. And let us say a geriatric patient, we are monitoring in a old age home or a geriatric hospital, we are interested to see their movement with a sensor, with this kind of a setup. It can be on the chest, arm, wrist, finger, body fluids. Everything can be continuously monitored by embedding the right senses and looking a pattern for a period of time. So that way, it avoids a lot of human resource. Definitely, we need to have doctors and healthcare assistant. But when I'm telling a situation where we got let us say we got 10 people and we got only one nurses, we got 25 patients, we got only one doctors. And in that kind of conditions, you need to monitor them on 24/7. Everybody, even if we put a doctors or a nurses, they will work on a shift basis, right? After 8 hours, they obviously they need to take a rest, and then somebody need to come. So if you look at the operation, it is very difficult, and keeping health assistant 1:1 is very difficult. So when you employ such techniques, then you have the luxury of collecting all the data 24/7 from this geriatric population. That is the benefit. And we have seen the healthcare IoT. If you look at what are all the different categories, these are all the different categories. We can talk about temperature, we can talk about glucose, oxygen saturation, even we can monitor the mood of a person. And medication management is another important area. And rehabilitation. I have one interesting use case here, and asthma monitoring. And this is the way it happens. We all can easily understand how things are happening. It's wearable devices, and it is sent to the cloud, and the system does the analysis and provides the information to the doctors. User also gets the data, but up to a level. The crux of it will be known to the doctors, and then he can advise the patient accordingly. And it all happens through a very what is available in hand, like smartphones and Bluetooth connectivity, and from cloud we can connect to the overall ecosystem in a single point, right? If you are thinking about a big network, it will be designed in this way, where we have got multiple IoT sensors and smartphones, watches for a big healthcare network. We need to bring in Apache Kafka kind of data streaming applications, and definitely we need to have some data storages. We have got advanced. This is even HDFS and Cassandra is little fading away. We have got advanced databases coming in now. And with this high level, continuously data is generated, that is streamed and stored, analyzed, and then given to the visualization and predictive analysis purposes. If you go one step detail, this is the way it is happening. Even with the sensors connected to the, let us say the smartphone is not able to handle it, we can keep equipment like Raspberry Pi. The palm size of Raspberry Pi will handle hundreds of sensors together, and then it can be connected to the different topics. It can look at the temperature, another one can look at the BP, another one can look at the glucose. The different topics data, whatever we are collecting, is all been sent to the stream processing. Use the Spark, and we can do a batch processing also, saying that how the data can be managed. And then again, we can do a real-time analysis, and you can be using either a tool, or if you want to put it in a public on the web-based applications, let us build a Angular or React-based front-end and Node.js-based backend, and then you can develop in a web.
Anand sir, I guess you are not audible.
Sir, the connection is lost. He has left.
Get to know that wherever you are, you can get to know what is the patient conditions, particularly what is happening, all those things. right?
Audience, kindly wait. I think there might be some issue.
Sorry, I think.
Yeah. I guess like
Sorry,
some
sorry.
kind of connection issues. Yeah. Fine. Yeah, fine.
Yeah. Sorry, Sabin. I think I lost the connection. Is it visible now?
Yeah, now fine. Now it's fine. You can go ahead.
Have you seen this? Was it clear after this?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, right. So I was talking about the wearable devices market. It is growing continuously. We have got a good CAGR here, and we are expecting $140 billion kind of market, particularly cardiac monitors. You remember, like when we go for now heart-related problems, a simple test would be like asking the patient to walk on the treadmill, and they find still they are not very clear about why this particular abnormalities are happening. A doctor used to ask you to put a device, and then there will be some 6 or 12 legs connected to your body, and then you need to wear it for 24 hours. I'm saying this is little old. Nowadays there are very smart devices have come up where you can easily collect those information. So particularly in the cardiac alone, it is a kind of a 2 billion market. Home healthcare, think about a pandemic situation, and we cannot admit all the patients to the hospital. We need to treat the patient wherever they are, particularly in home-based treatment methodologies. Home care, nowadays big hospitals are signing up home care packages where they will, let us say for the COVID, they will take care of as for let us say 15 days or 20 days overall. Morning and evening they will do the vitals monitoring, and the doctor will come and look at the data and then suggest. So that kind of a home healthcare sleep tracking applications, a lot of people are facing a lot of issues there as well. So the lot of innovation is happening. There is a lot of demand in medical senses, particularly wearable senses. So this is just a glimpse of it. Wearable alone, if you look at, you can start with the glass, specs, mouth guard. Mouth guard, we can, a lot of measurement happening through the saliva. And clothing, there are textile, the circuits are printed on the dress. And then from there also we are getting it. And then stick, we all know Fitbits and smartwatches becoming very normal. We were able to continuously see look at the armband, watches, rings, and I can enable the Sabin, is it clear?
Now it is fine, sir. Like there was a dragged voice previously. Now it is fine.
Okay. Is it clear now, Sabin?
Yes, sir, yes.
Audio as well as video?
Yes, fine.
Maybe I will switch off the video then.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we can, even from the eyeglasses, putting a contact lens, a kind of a device on your eyes, you can measure the blood glucose, and then we can put a patch, and then we can continuously monitor the ECG, and we can figure out the lactate, glucose, and the self-powered textile-based biosensors to measure the lactate on the leg. And there are so many other things. Graphene-based tooth sensors. We are going to see one more application, graphene-based, and microfluidic sensor. So there are so many sensors available nowadays in the healthcare ecosystem to to support the disease diagnosis and continuous monitoring purposes. In a broader way, if you look at what we are trying to do is, we are trying to understand the antibodies. We are trying to, we are interested to know the enzymes generated by the body. We are interested to understand the DNA of the person, and it's a cell level, microorganism level. We are interested for different diseases. How we this particular enzyme, how we are doing, what are the different options for us? Electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, cyclic voltammetry. There are different methodologies available to how do I convert the base biological signals, whatever I am getting, that into a digitized format. For that, what is the transducers we are using? Sometimes we use electrodes, sometimes we use thermistors, photon counters, pH electrode, piezoelectric devices. So this is the kind of the, look at the data, this is the cell level information, enzyme level information, how we are converting into different stages, how it is taking a shape. And then finally a digitized format numbers, we are getting it for the data processing, so that we were able to predict accurately, saying that no, what is happening with this particular patient. Wearable sensors, so far we have seen some now kind of a marketing kind of this. I just browsed a Philips saying that no, what is the latest innovations they are doing it. This is the wearable biosensor just taken from the Philips main website. Look at the sensors, no, the wearable biosensors. It gives you a heart rate. It will tell you the skin temperature. It will tell you the respiratory rate, body posture, fall detection, and step count. Everything with a single wearable biosensor. It will come for 3 to 4 days for use, and then we can throw it, and then we can get a new one. So instead of attaching so many wires and strings in your body when you are recovering, you just put a patch, and then it gives you continuous data, and the data has been transferred to the nearest devices, and then it has been taken into the cloud, and that somebody is looking at it, a team of members are looking at it, is looking at the data, or the algorithm is looking at the data, and if it look for any threshold, now increase or decrease in the threshold, it will alert the people, and it will predict, saying that no, what is the recovery rate and what are all the challenges. So this is very, very practical. It is available and people started using it. One of the interesting use case what I have seen is like the company Lume. I'm no way connected with this company. I just thought like this was interesting, so I'm highlighting this company, in a Boston-based company. What they offering is like the power to quit is on your wrist, because the smoking we have seen in the largest cause of death across the globe. One of the top reason is smoking. So definitely we need to find out ways to innovative ways to bring down the number of smokers, right? So what they do is like they set up a AI powered smartwatch. We can look at it. I'm wearing a watch, but how does it stops me from smoking? There is an interesting background to that. So it tracks the behaviors, and let us say a person is in a right-handed, it looks for the behavior. Maybe obviously we need to have that watch on that hand and look for the motion, like what is the behavior, like it understands from the pose estimation. I will show you in detail about what is pose estimation. We know in a deep learning, how does computer vision, AI-based computer vision, how do we do the pose estimation, so that we can track exactly, saying that no, how is the leg movement, hand movement, and everything. What they do is like they detect and they predict, saying that no, if this is a kind of movement, I think this is due to smoking, or this is eating. Smoking and eating, definitely there is the pattern system will understand by auditing thousands of trials. And then there is an intervention done by this smartwatch. Either it will send you a text, it will give you vibration, or it will give you ideas, how do we need to do that, like avoid that thought for smoking or whatever. So what they do is like they divide it into 2 steps. Like one is pre-quit. So initially somebody has to sign up, and then they need to start wearing this watch. During that time, they just gather data about when the user is smoking. time of the day of the week, either it is after the meal or before the meal, after walking or before going to bed, or driving to work or driving back home. So this is the kind of a post estimation we are talking about, where it understands the hand motion and it records. From that, it records the GPS data, it records the time of the day, everything. So in a, let us say in a week or two, you understand a pattern. And then it starts the quitting stage, where based on the data gathered in phase 1, 1 second. Based on the post estimation, we understand all these things, and then what happens is, like during the quitting phase, it knows that, like this is the highly the person is high probability for the person to have smoke, because we know the pattern. If this is so and so places, even they go one level up, saying that no, last time when he was smoking, or somebody was smoking, what are all the nearest Bluetooth, what are all the devices, who are all the friends, who are all the area what they are going in, obviously with all the security and personal data, privacy, all these things taken care. They look at it saying that if this person is joining with this group, definitely there is a high chance that this person is going to smoke. And then it starts sending the alerts. Right, it starts sending the alert by 2 minutes before, 3 minutes before, and all. So, and if you look at the data, false positive gesture rate is 0.005. That means it predicts and tells you, saying that no, this person is about to smoke. They are going up to that level of understanding. That's where I'm talking. I shown an initial slide where we were talking about. It is not only the. One second.
We booked the Zoom from 11 o'clock.
Can you please adjust?
I mean,
some disturbances in the meeting room. Sorry for that. So with the sensors, with the combination of all the specialists together, we were able to think about eradicating life-taking habits, like how we can quit smoking. Very, very innovative way. We are bringing in a deep learning, we are bringing statistics, we are bringing in census, healthcare, physicians, socialists. Together, we are trying to make this kind of application. Another company, they are trying to generate a sensor. It's a wearable sensor. It is disposable. It is a biosensor. What it does is, like, let us say we have got a wound, and then we are interested in the doctors are interested in how fast that particular wound is. Parameters we do not know, but the doctors need to know, like what are the parameters we need to look at it. Maybe the how it is dry or wet, or so many other cell related changes, whatever it is happening. So all this information we were able to get through the printed sensors. Very, very thin sensors. It's a biosensors. It is able to just to put a patch, and then it is connected again, Bluetooth, low powered Wi-Fi enabled devices, Bluetooth enabled devices. We were able to get the information from the body skin area where the wound is there, and then it is continuously monitored, and then you are able to customize the treatment methodology accordingly. So it says that we can call it as a maybe miracle material. That's what it is mentioned. So it is a border between inorganic, that is, it's a microelectronics, and organic, it is a biology. It connects both the words, and it is able to bridge both together, so that we were able to identify the exact condition of that skin. I said at the beginning of the discussion saying that now I will share my personal experience. That is, when in my previous experiences, we were building an application for predicting the Parkinson's disease. So far, we have seen the sensor means it's a real sensors. It can be biosensor, it can be wearable sensors, or it can be a mechanical, electronic, big, small, medium, whatever it is. So the idea is we need to understand the behavior, certain parameters of the patient. It's not necessarily that you need to employ a physical sensor. Now we are going to the next stage where we just look at an image. Machine is able to, we know like machine is able to understand an image, machine is able to understand and analyze a video, audio, a text, everything. Now using the AI and MLDL, we were able to analyze that. One of the, that's what I was saying, like here, Parkinson's disease, I'll just give you a context, quick context. Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative diseases. The people affected by this disease, they will have motor disorder. They cannot walk freely, they cannot talk, they cannot get up from a chair, they cannot express freely. The facial expressions will become rigid, and they'll have a lot of the speech. No, they will find difficulty to speak continuously. They'll have a lot of issues, and the tremor, they feel a lot of tremor in hands and legs. It will be shaking. The problem here is like this particular disease can be it's subjective. There is no biomarkers. In order to identify this disease, there is no biomarkers available as a date. So it is only by the experienced neurologist. They can look at the patient, do some qualitative analysis in a subjective manner, and then they decide this person is having a Parkinson's disease or not. And again, it is very with the only experienced people can do that. Again, once you start the treatment methodology, a person whether we need to increase the dosage, decrease the dosage, how is the recovery, every time we need to see that how the person is doing in order. There is a scale, something called Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, UPDRS, where they define saying that what is the non-motor experiences, motor experiences and all. And I'm skipping this, we all know this, how normal programming and machine learning programming. This solution, what it does is like we keep the AI engine in the cloud, and we got a patient app and we got a doctor app. And the patient app, what they have to do is like they need to submit either video, audio, or certain input. We are going to see that. And the data is sent to the cloud, and that all the algorithm applies on that particular data, and the doctor gets the analysis output so that he can do a right treatment for the patient. We'll see how it is. Gait is again, gait analysis, like how the body moves from one point to another point, how the heads and legs are, the patient is able to move their heads and legs and all these things. So we have seen, even we putting a sensor in order to, because I need to understand as a doctor, I need to understand what is the amplitude of the steps taken by the patient in every second, how quickly he is able to wave his hand, how he is able to fold it, how is the neck movement, everything. So think about a kind of a senses we need to employ to understand the whole pattern of it. It becomes very difficult. And the previous studies, what they are doing is like putting a census again. But then later we were looking at how this can be replaced with the deep learning computer vision based applications. What we have done is like we have applied the computer vision based post estimation techniques on a video, patient video, whatever they are submitting. So we'll ask the patient to walk forward for 25 feet and then backward for 25 feet. And we ask the patient to take that video and submit it to the application. And that on that video, the AI algorithm works. It implies the deep learning techniques, post estimation techniques, and it extracts the body part coordinates. These are all the data points numbers. For example, if it is in a 30 FPS kind of a video in a second. It takes these many number of data points in X, Y, Z axis, and overall data point. What we are looking at it is, let us say 10 seconds of video. We were able to generate 9,72,000 data points. This is so much for a data. We know deep learning algorithms crave for more number of data points. This is sufficient to train, let us say, some 50 patients, 10 seconds video. We know, let us say we give normal patients, we give a Parkinson patient, and we define our network in such a way, algorithm in such a way, it understands by looking at the data points from a video. We convert all into the vectors, in a deep learning, we do all this. And then we were able to predict this person is having a Parkinson disease or not, equal to the how a neurology will look at a person in person. They will ask the patient to walk. So we were able to predict the same way the doctor is able to do that. And finally, all the numbers are getting into the vectors, and that vector is fed into the algorithm. But what happens is people will say that, like, now we're talking about explainable AI or block boxes. AI says that we are not able to understand what basis it has decided at all. To avoid that, what we tried is, like, we have put the data. Finally, whatever numbers we are getting, we try to plot it. And then we know what is the normal person if he walks, what is the kind of the graph it look like. If it is an abnormal person, here the abnormal is the Parkinson patient. If they are walking, what is the kind of strides they are getting? This is the kind of the below graph it shows. So you are not only the algorithm gives you the probability value, you are able to, by the graphs also, you are able to understand what is normal or abnormal. So that's what I was saying, like we will be submitting the video file, and then all the data points are collected and analyzed, and then given using, you will get the scores and you will get the graphs, and you will say that whether the person is PD or not. This is the graph showing that, like, how that particular video need to be recorded. Bradykinesia is another very interesting and important test in identifying the Parkinson's disease. So even the initial approach was putting the sensors like this, and what we need to ask the patient is, we need to ask the patient to move the finger like this. We need to ask the patient to move the finger like this for more than 10 times. It looks simple for us, but for the Parkinson's disease patient, after moving 5 to 6 times, they will find difficulty in moving the finger. So this is called a bradykinesia test. So again, wearing the sensors and continuously calling them for an hospital to do this test is becoming a problem. So what we did, we've taken a video of a patient, and then we apply hand pose estimation on that. And from that, we understand the coordinates, the similar how we are doing the full body. Here we are taking only the hand pose estimation. From that, we take the coordinates, and then we feed into the system, and then we find out the results. Similar sense, we do other facial expressions analysis. I'm rushing up because we are running out of time. So in a face, we have got multiple action units, each and every cheek and lips, upper lip, nose. There are multiple facial units available in face. As I said, like this particular PD group of patients, they will find difficulty in even making a facial expressions. So we give different videos to them, humor, comedy, or disgusting videos. By looking at the videos, how do they make their movement? We understand from that pattern, and then how we put a facial expression analysis from a face. We take around 72 data points. How each point is getting changed, rate of change of each point with respect to the time against each of these action units. We understand the data and then try to predict the diseases. Speech, again, converting from the speech to the algorithm, we use MFCC, male frequency spectrum coefficients and all. I'm just skipping it. And tremor analysis, a simple test where we will ask the patient to keep the mobile phone on top of the hand. And we know, right, if there is a tremor, there is a movement happening at X, Y, Z coordinates. We take that using the accelerometer. Inbuilt accelerometer is available in the mobile phone. We connect the data, and the app collects the data and sends that from that, we can put a simple ML algorithm to understand, saying that no, this is which group, it is in a PD group or non-PD group or something. So there are, so this is the one of the practical thing which I have my first-hand experiences we have done. We have seen interesting use cases like this Lume company. They try to help the smokers to quit smoking. And in an interesting way, you will get an SMS and you will get the message saying that like, oh, why don't you try this, that, and it will keep on reminding you as if like you are employing a personal coach, paid personal coach, trying to help you come out of the smoking. And the biosensors, the biodegradable, the biosensors applying directly on the wound. So this healthcare sensors devices from big to medium to small and very thin, and even we have seen a growth saying that no, it is not only the sensors. We can look at it. How are we meeting the objectives even without sensors? By using the computer vision. How by using the AML capabilities, natural language processing, speech analysis. We all have seen. And we have seen like how this is used in healthcare settings, different healthcare settings. It can be in cardiology, it can be for the diabetic management, it can be for Parkinson's disease, either COVID management, respiration rate, everything we need to monitor using all these methodologies. So we have another 15 minutes available for us. And if time permits, I wanted to share one session where I have some practical data which collected from the census. We can see some analysis. Can we go, Professor Sebin?
Sure. Hello.
Okay. Yeah. Let me stop sharing this.
Yes.
Give me a moment. Just 30 seconds, I'm getting ready.
Okay, sir.
Sharing my screen now.
Oh, yes, it is visible. Yes.
Yes. So this is about the PPG signal. Maybe what we are getting it from a pulse oximeter or any number of any other devices. When we collect a PPG signal, the fingertip, what we collected that signal, health signal. How are we getting the heart rate? And we can do many more things. We will cover only the heart rate here in this example. How are we getting the heart rate from this PPG signal? Let us say we have collected some 10-15 seconds of PPG signals, and then we wanted to understand how is the heart rate look like. So we have simple Python programming with making use of pandas and NumPy and all the PyPlot libraries, Matplotlib and all. So there is an interesting library called HeartPy, which specifically this particular library was designed for understanding the heart signals. So just you need to call that heartpy.py Python library, and then what you're trying to see is like you have the data, because in the library itself we have got a sample example. I'm just calling that, and we are trying to plot that. So it gives you pulses. What is the data? What is the PPG data? From that, we are able to just plot it using this library. And then we try to run the analysis. There is again a default function hp.plotter. When we keep this WD and M values, we were able to get the figure. I'll show you the numbers. So it quickly gives you the blood pressure, heart rate and blood pressure, systolic, diastolic values, and breathing grade. These are all different values in the healthcare settings from by looking at the data. And I'm running the next code. This is a different data set, how we are getting it. And then we are understanding the peak. We will talk about what is that theory behind how we are understanding and all. I'm just running. It is not only gives you the waveform and the points, it tells you the date and time and everything. It gives you the sample rate on which we are accessing this. What is the total time taken? What is the other parameters? So this was done by Van Gent. It is available in GitHub. If you want to give a try, you can try that. So here, I just need to show you the figure. Here, what happens is like it goes with like how do we understand the PPG signals? You try to understand the peak values, saying that no, between two values there is a peak, high peak, but is the systolic, and second one is the highest peak always happening is the diastolic, and then second highest peak what is happening is the systolic peak. We try to understand the peak from continuous data, and then we see that we skip some of the data which is not falling like a diastolic or systolic. We remove the outliers. We will get a lot of noise. We may not get a this is a sample image. That's why we get a very nice figure. But initially when you collect, you will have a lot of data, and it will not be so it will not look so nice, but you may have to do a lot of data cleaning activities to get this kind of a signal. And then you are trying to predict the diastolic and systolic peaks. I'll show you a graph where you will understand, saying that no, how does how what is the theory behind it. And with that we are identifying, and then we are trying to the first step would be to find the position of all the R peak. We call it as that R peak. So we need to understand the region of interest, ROI. Finding out the region of interest, there are multiple ways. We can fit a curve on the ROI data points and solve the exposition for the maximum, or we can determine the slope between each set of points, and we can find this set where the slope reverses, or mark data points within ROI, find the position of the highest point. There are multiple ways, but we are going with the point number 2 and 3, like determining the slope between each set of points in ROI and mark data points within ROI. Within the model only we are trying to make this analysis, and then we are getting this results. So this is on mainly on the PPG analysis. From this, how we are getting the heart rate alone. Are you one more analysis? Give me a minute. Yeah, I'll share you the another. Few more seconds. I'm taking this data into Kaggle. I'm running the notebook from the kaggle.com itself. Just switching on the Kaggle services. I'm keeping the accelerator as a GPU so that we get immediate results. And let me share my screen now. So this is the Kaggle notebook where we have, it's a Python environment and we have a GPU setup. This is the data collected from the different ECG signals. And we are interested to understand, first we wanted to explore how the data look like, and then we wanted to predict, saying that like, what is the chance of heart attack, right? So we just set up the basics, and these are all the parameters. There are different variables here: age, CA, CP, and there are so many other things. And then we got finally the target variable 0 or 1. Target 0 is less chance for heart attack, 1 is more chance of heart attack. And let us just, we are taking it from heart.csv, and we wanted to understand the shape of it. We got 303 by 14 is the shape, and we are interested to understand how does the data look like: age, gender, CP, TRT, BPS, cholesterol, FBS, all those things, and output is 1. So these all the data, whatever we are looking at is probability, high probability for the heart attack. And we are trying to understand the unique number in each column, how many records we have. And then I'm just rushing up because we have less time. And what is the categorical column? What is the continuous data? What is the target variable? We try to divide that. Finally, we are trying to understand a high-level summary before we get into the analysis. Anything? What is the mean, standard deviation, all the details. And so in a data analysis, you know, we need to look at the missing values in a data before in order to get a good accuracy. And we need to look at the missing value, and we need to follow different strategies to fill up those missing values. Here it's a very big graph. We have so much of calculations available. And finally, we are just comparing CP versus gender, FBS versus XS, EX and G, and different parameters the healthcare professionals will understand better. And similarly, another set of graphs by which we know the box plot it is, how is the data trend happening, and a count plot for targets. You will understand, saying that no, what is the total number among the given population. We have seen 303, high chances, low chances, what is the numbers. And this is the data we have. And then we are just looking at the correlation matrix. And then now we are just plotting the correlation matrix. And we are plotting the heat map to understand the relations between different parameters. Distribution of age according to target variable, TRTBS based on target variable, all this data. It is like, think about, see, we have the data collected, the PPG signal. From that, what are the different kinds of analysis we were able to do in order to better understand the diseases by using our open source Python. And it's only the analytics component we have seen. Now we are going to do the training of this data, and then using some basic ML techniques, we will understand the probability scores. And
Anand sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, you are not. Did you talk something? Maybe.
No. I'm just
Okay,
running
okay,
this.
fine. Yeah,
because-
fine, fine.
Yeah. We are running it. It is taking little time because it's a big plant. And by finally, what we do a simple, SVM based ML technique to understand, saying that no, among this we put under training and testing, and then finally simply uh, uh, SVM model will give you a accuracy scores. You wanted to run this, but let it run. I think this is pretty much the analysis, whatever we can see in a quick way. I think we are running out of, because it's a big graph. That's why it took a lot of time, and so many graphs we are trying to put it in a single instance, and we are doing the feature categorical columns, and then feature extraction, feature mapping, and all those things. And we divide the data into train and test. What is the X train, Y train values, and then we simply apply one. And I thought of doing some multiple algorithms and see that what best it looks. But SVM gives a kind of a 0.86% accuracy in terms of predicting, and there is a chance to improvise the SVM by arranging the parameters, the different components. And then when we do that, we were getting, after doing the hyperparameter tuning, we were able to get 0.90. That means 90% we were able to predict by just getting the PPG signals. And here we are not only looking at the algorithm, we are also physically seeing the graphs, how it looks like against the different parameters. So doctors no need to rely only on the algorithm. They can look at the graphs, and then they can look at the output scores, and then they can decide. So that's the idea. We are doing this. I'm stopping this notebook, and I'm going back to the presentation again. We are at the end of are able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this I wanted to show during the discussion itself. The peak I was saying, diastolic and systolic peak. There are two peaks. This is the first peak, and this is the second peak. Programmatically, we are understanding the two peaks, and then we are plotting it. So by this, we are almost end of the session. Maybe if we have few minutes, we can have some question answer, or we can wind up. Over to professors. And I have given my email ID, personal email ID, and LinkedIn and Twitter contact. We can collaborate. I'm sure like this is a big engineering community across the country. People would be doing a similar research, better research, some advanced research, whatever. And I'm interested always in healthcare AI and AI, ML, sensors, IoT, whatever. We can collaborate. We can work it out, and so so that way we can be in touch. So please feel free to reach out to me through these channels, and then we can discuss. Over to Professor Sebin for any questions.
So thank you, Anand sir. So the floor is open for questions. If the participants having any doubts, you can interact with the resource person. You can unmute yourself and ask the questions. Otherwise, you can post the questions over the chat box also.
Hello, sir. I am having one question. Can you show me the SVM and other output, the highest accuracy by SVM 90%, right? In heart disease prediction.
No, it's a 90%. The idea here is not trying to. I'm not getting deeper into which algorithm. Maybe we can try putting by comparing some different algorithm. We can go even 95. We can try different algorithms. The idea is not the algorithm.
Exactly.
How the sensor data we are collecting it, and then we can make use of ML algorithms to predict the outcome. That is the idea. So
Okay.
accuracy, I'm not the question. Definitely we can
Okay.
build. 90 is not acceptable in the healthcare world.
Yes,
Definitely
yes.
we need to have a better
Okay.
accuracy.
But
Yeah.
get dummies, and that the question is for my purpose, the get dummies and the standard scaler, which is not required. Suppose if you are using the random forest and decision tree, and still we are getting the good result. So it is necessary to perform these a dummy variable
Mhm.
and a standard scaler, because this is only required in standard ML algorithms, right?
Correct. That's what I'm saying. So this is just an example in order to say that no, when we have a real-time use cases and we are trying to build an application over it, we definitely look into all the details and then we need to build the right solution.
Okay.
So the discussion here is not on the algorithm side. The discussion is on the sensor data.
Yes, yes, sir.
How are
I'm
we doing
asking
the
just
analytics?
for myself because I'm doing something on it. So that's
Yes.
why I'm asking. So if I'm getting some
Yes,
better
yes.
accuracy other than the doing the dummy
Mhm.
variables and the standard scaler,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
can we use,
Mhm.
suppose if I'm getting better accuracy
Mhm.
with help of dummy variables and after
Mhm.
standard scaling, and I am getting the
Mhm.
better accuracy other
Mhm.
without doing this dummy variable and the standard scaler, so can we
Mhm.
accept this one because
Uh,
less processing is required?
Yes,
What do you think?
yes. In case we need to verify with the ground truth, definitely we know, right? Like always, we need to look at the ground truth. Ground truth here in the sense like the physicians will look at the data, the expert will look at the data, and then they see that maybe we can compare how our algorithm is doing, how is the expert output is giving. Give some 10 samples to the algorithm, 10 samples to the expert, how they are predicting. That is the only way to predict the ground truth here, because we are just trying to predict something, but in actual scenario we can see, compare with a human being, and then we need to decide, because healthcare we cannot go with any assumptions. We need to see that even whenever any new applications are doing, we are implementing, it will go in a shadow mode. What we do is like we don't introduce into the first week of the deployment itself. For 2 to 3 months it will just go in a shadow mode. We just start collecting the data, and it will algorithm will give an output and we'll start recording it, and then expert and the physician, they used to give their opinion, and then we compare, and then we see that no, what is the correlation, how it is trending, what is the plus or minus, and then when it is getting near to the accuracy level of a human being, then only it is getting into the deployment. So that way healthcare we need to be very careful, Priya.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir. I will check it.
Yes,
more
Sabin, I think
questions?
I also need to join another meeting.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Kindly share the collab notebooks and data sets with the participants so that I mean they can
Sure,
work it out.
will.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure,
Yeah,
we'll do that.
thank you, Dr. Anand sir, for joining us and providing a valuable session with all the level of like as is like detailed with your notebook collab real-time implementation explanation. And thank you. And yes, Dr. Sabin. Sorry, yes, Sabin, you can.
So thank you, Anand sir, for the wonderful session. Especially the practicals were really good. So I think the participants got benefited from the session. So on behalf of the IIIT Kottayam, we would like to place on record our sincere gratitude to Dr. Anand for this wonderful session. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sabin. Thank you, Professor Vanikrishnan and Dr. Victor Paul. And thank you all the participants. We will collaborate in the coming days. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we are taking a break right now from 11:30 to 12, and our next session will begin by 12 p.m. So the attendance link is available in the chat box. So you are requested to fill the attendance sheet as early as possible. Okay, so then
Sabin, one second, like for the information, like the next session we are going to have one international speaker from Cardiff Metropolitan University, UK, on the topic of like, as you know, like a security and privacy management. So hope we will have a good session, and I just wish people to like to be utilize the opportunity of the resource person of the international level. Yeah, that's
okay. Yeah. So we'll see you at 12 p.m. Okay.